So I guess today I usually talk a lot about my experiences now, like the transitions I went through in college and the struggles and everything, but since this is a women's in sport and there was a question yesterday about how to retain girls in sports, I kind of want to talk a little bit about my early experiences in sports. And so I started athletics at an early age, sport and activity at an early age, like I'm sure a lot of young girls did, but I was into everything. There was very rarely that we were home watching TV, and maybe on Saturday morning, that was about it, but my parents had me, my sister and I, busy at all times. Early age, we were into soccer, gymnastics, ballet, did basketball, and there was even a point where I begged my mom forever to do horseback riding, and it was like begging her for a good 2 months, and then finally I watched my friend at her horseback riding practice, and I realized I was terrified of horses. So that didn't work out. But everything else, we had a very active childhood, and I mean a lot of that was due to the fact that both of my parents were athletes. For those who don't know, my mom ran track and field from Bermuda, and my dad was a cricket player here in the islands. So those were very important things for them to pass down to their children, whether or not that we were going to pursue it in the future, although I'm pretty sure that they, back in their mind, was like, yes, you'll be doing a sport. But just getting them involved, and it actually starting at a young age, doing all those sports and activities from something as extreme as basketball to ballet, really helped me understand certain things that are important later on when I'm in track and field, about how coordination was important in ballet, flexibility in gymnastics, the toughness in basketball. And you see that when I reflect upon that, how all those little things back then really helped my progress as I became a high school student and late middle school, and I was excelling above some of my other female athletes and friends. And so my first love in sport was in soccer, and even though I was doing all these other sports, it was clear that I probably was going to excel in soccer just because, I was fast, and it was the one that I loved the most. And soccer, and I talk a lot about soccer now because even though, track and field is my sport now, soccer really set the foundation for me as an athlete, because it, amongst a lot of things, taught me discipline and which Lisa talked about yesterday, and also having a vision for yourself and goals. So in soccer, and it just so happened that my father was my soccer coach for my whole career, whether it was town soccer, club soccer, I did high school soccer, and I even was competing at the Olympic development level and state level for Massachusetts, and heading out into the Olympic development pool. So I competed at the top level of soccer by age 12 in the US. And a part of the reason why I slowly weaned out of it was because I probably did a little bit too much and kind of got dried out and tired out of it. But because I had my family members directly involved in my sport, in my event, and because soccer was a skilled sport, much like basketball and other sports where you can practice a lot on your own, and it's important. It's not just the athletic ability, although being fast and being agile is important. It's your skills with the ball and quickness, and those things in the backyard. My dad would make me juggle 500 juggles a day, or I'd make sure that I was going downstairs on Saturday after I finished watching my cartoons in the morning. He would force me to watch Manchester United games and stuff, and I didn't even understand all this. I was like, this is so boring. But he taught me to be a diligent athlete outside of just being in practice. And like I said, this is still in elementary school and maybe early middle school where he was making me do all this, and I was practicing almost every day because there was a time when I was on 3 teams, and when I slowly kind of weaned away from soccer, it really helped my transition to track and field, because track and field is such an individual sport, and it requires a lot of discipline to push yourself to do things, because at the end of the day, unless you're on a relay, you're the only one out there, you're the only one who can push yourself. And just being diligent and being on a schedule and knowing, oh, well, I have to do abs, I don't really want to do abs, or I have to do this extra set, or oh, I didn't do that right, I need to do that again. You know, I feel like a lot of that came from having both of my parents on my back about everything when I was younger. And and then the other thing was that I always had, regardless of what I was doing, and even though it probably wasn't discussed all the time, but it was whatever I was going to do in a sport, in the back of my head was like, I'm going to pursue this in college. You know, it may not have been, I'm going to pursue it after college, but I will be doing this to get to college and hopefully as a means to go to college for free. And so when I was playing soccer, that was the goal. You know, for the longest time, I thought I was going to be playing soccer, Division I soccer at a school, and then when, you know, it switched up to track and field, you know, that became the goal. And this is also something that Lisa touched on a little bit yesterday about having incentives for girls. And I just think the biggest incentives is to compete at what you know, for me, doing a sport is great, but you know, it's great when you use it, when you can use it for education, when you can use it for other things to get you to a further place. And you know, growing up in high school, as much as it's great that young girls are athletic, and you know, I commend that, but I would also talk to some of my friends, well, are you going to continue this? Like, what's your end goal? And sometimes it isn't their end goals, and sometimes they just do it to be active and fit, and like I said, that's a great thing. And then there's also a way where we encourage, well, you know, if you really love this sport and you really love what you're doing, put a little bit more time to it and maybe develop it a little bit and see yourself, have a vision for yourself, even if it's not Division I, maybe Division III or Division II, or even intramurals or something like that. And you know, that's a vision that I felt I had at an early age, and in part due to my older sister who was 4 years older than me, and she kind of was my role model, and I just did everything she did, so you know, she was going to do it, I was going to do it. But I think that mentorship and also, you know, instilling those ideas of that you can take this beyond just your Tuesday, Thursday classes and develop into something that will be advantageous to you for life. Because, I mean, realistically, college is expensive, and you know, and just personally for me, where sport has taken me around the world, like I truly fell in love with track and field when I began traveling as a junior athlete, well, as a Bermuda junior athlete, to different countries and the Cryptic Games, and that really opened my eyes to the world of athletics. And, you know, I probably would have went back to soccer if it wasn't for, you know, the year after I left soccer that I did Cryptic Games in Bermuda, where I saw athletes from all these islands, and I saw the celebration of sport, like the excitement. And even back home, and my friends in the US, I'm like, you guys have not seen a track meet until you leave the US. Like, basically I try to say is like, pen relays, that's like the norm. Because they're like, oh, the pen relays is amazing. I was like, yeah, it's great, but that's actually like the celebration of the sport. That is something that, I mean, not even just the Caribbean, like other countries where you see that a lot, and it's a great environment. And I truly fell in love with that the culture of it. And not to say it's not in the US, but it's just, you know, it's just different, where you have the crowd is full and you have the music going, the band going, the announcers, it's like announcing a football match, like the way it goes. So yeah, those my experiences when I was younger really shaped how I envisioned myself and developed, I think, myself into the athlete that I am now when I went through college, and how I was prepared for it. And I think based on like my observations and experiences younger, there's two things that common things that I observe about girls in sports now, and you know, I think that we've definitely come a long way, where we're incorporated in sports and we're fitting in and we're welcomed. But it's almost like we're welcomed into somebody else's house. So we're still not, sports to me still isn't, it's still a male's world. And you know, now that I'm older, I don't really think about gender in sports. Like I just go out there and run. But when I think back to when I was younger about how, you know, if you wanted to be athletic, you're automatically labeled as the tomboy, or there was never an instance where I was the all girls playing with the one boy. It was always all boys playing when I was the one girl. And like I said, it's not that we're not welcomed. I was always welcomed, but it was that I was still the outsider, and I think that's something that a lot of young girls still have to deal with now, that, you know, we're welcomed, but we're just not, you don't necessarily associate being a woman with being athletic or being in sports. It's like a foreign world that we're welcomed into. And along those lines, like, some of my best experiences when I was younger was when I was playing with the boys, because, I mean, for one, up until like 7th grade, I was even though I'm not as tall as Lisa, I was taller than all the boys, faster. So I was actually able to, like, one of my soccer teams, I played with the guys and the boys, and, you know, even though it was a little intimidating, it was the first time where I can say, well, I was playing amongst the best, not females, but just the 12-year-olds, you know. So, and so that was like I always remember that experience when I played with the guys, because I mean, in soccer, where it's a skill sport, it's a little bit, you know, you can work with that. You know, sports like track and field, the biological and everything, it's difficult, but yeah. So that's one thing I observe a lot, that, you know, we've come a long way, but we still are not, being women is still not synonymous with being athletic. Whereas, and then leads to my second point of the ideas of femininity and masculinity, and how I think we need to do better to redefine what that means to be feminine and masculine, and especially in respects to being athletic, because when you think about being masculine, you think about being buff, athletic, you know, strong, but being feminine, we don't use those adjectives to describe that. And that's a problem, because if we use those adjectives to describe someone being athletic, and we use those adjectives to describe someone being masculine, then it's hard to be feminine in athletics without being labeled as masculine. And, like, that's something that I notice a lot with young girls, and you notice a lot when you talk about bodies. Like, when I was younger, I played ballet. I did ballet, like I said, and I remember how we were doing positions, like first position, second position. Your arms had to be relaxed. And even though I was the tallest one in class, the skinniest person in class, the instructor kept on saying, you need to relax your arms. And my arms are relaxed. And because she's like, well, it's because you're more muscular than the other girls, you're just not going to be able to do this right. I was like, okay, just because my arms were a little bit muscular, I can't do first position. And I remember that, because not only was I super self-conscious after that, because I looked around the room, it's like, yeah, I guess I do have these little golf balls and everyone else doesn't. But it definitely made me a lot more self-conscious about my body after that. And, you know, I was always, you know, self-conscious about wearing heels, because it might accentuate my calves too much and my quads, and, like, I was still skinny, but I was muscular skinny, and it just, the way people, the little comments here and there people would say would always be like, well, I don't know, is this what I have? But and it's just the fact that being, you know, embracing our bodies in that certain way of being muscular and toned, it's still something that's kind of looked down upon. You know, I was watching a show the other day, and the mom was like, well, I don't want my daughter playing volleyball because I don't want her to get muscular like the boys. And then she added, in addition to that phrase I was already offended by, that, and I also don't want her to be gay or something. As immediately associating being a female athlete with being macho, muscular, and that you had to be a lesbian or something. And I was just like, what? What kind of thinking is that? And it also further the idea that, you know, both of the people that comment to me about, when I was younger, about my muscular toned or whatever, they're all women, not men. So it's also, you know, as women that we have to start supporting our girls in this idea. And so when people come up to me and they say, well, what do you think about the sexualization of women in sport? And I'm like, well, you know what? I think there is the sexualization of women in general, but in sport, I really don't mind it so much, because rarely, when I was younger, rarely do you see a celebration of female bodies, especially fit, toned, and muscular, athletic. Like, I don't mind it as long as it's tasteful. And so those are just kind of the thoughts that I've had about when I reflect about when I was younger, the insecurities I had as growing up about my body because I was stronger than the other girls. And